Well, hello everyone. Today is October 31st, 2018, and my name is Raphael Garcia. And first and foremost, thank you for taking a second to listen to this show because we are doing something different. I've been talking about launching a pro wrestling podcast for months now, probably even longer. So now we're finally getting the job done. I'm over here at MMAratings.net where we are diversifying our combat sports and entertainment coverage, and that includes pro wrestling. And it's interesting because the reason why I actually got into MMA was through pro wrestling years ago when I was younger by accident. Maybe I'll tell that story one day, but as we diversify, we talked about covering different aspects of combat sports, and professional wrestling is growing as a marketplace and an industry as a whole. So now we think it's time to kind of let, begin talking about wrestling in a podcast format, maybe covering it in some long form pieces as well on the site. So tonight is episode 1 of Let's Talk Wrestling. And so thank you first and foremost for taking a second to listen to this content. Please be sure to like and share what you hear. You can like our site, or excuse me, like our content on YouTube. You can share and subscribe there. You can also check us out at MMARatingsNet.net, where this podcast will be posted for your listening pleasure, at a later date this evening. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about the show. First, I want to introduce myself for people who may be coming to MMA Ratings just for this podcast and this wrestling content. But I've been covering sports for 12 years now, since 2006, and everything from mixed martial arts to football to basketball to baseball to more. And I've been covering professional wrestling probably for the last 2 years now, but I've been a fan since as long as I can remember. As I mentioned, it got me into other combat sports down the line, but pro wrestling was always my first love. I actually teach wrestling and teach no-gi jiu-jitsu at a location where I live, so I've been doing that for a few years as well, and I'm kind of really well versed in the subject matter. And what I want to do with this show is be a little different than what a lot of the other podcasts are doing. Most of those shows are rundown shows where they talk about the recent events going on across professional wrestling and run down the shows from start to finish, match by match. I don't really want to do that. While there is a space for that, I think there are multiple other people who are already doing that in the industry, and I don't want to add to that conversation. Maybe we will sometime every now and then, but I want to focus on some of the major topics that are going on within the industry and kind of cover it from there. And I'm looking to bring other voices in on the show on a bi-weekly basis. Some people who I work with or work closely with, who I am fans of their work, and I think they're going to have a they're going to be a great addition to this podcast once I get them in, because I'll be able to talk about a lot of different things. So with that in mind, tonight's topic focuses mainly on WWE Evolution and women's wrestling as a whole. If you are unaware somehow, Evolution occurred this past Sunday, and it was a women's only pay-per-view, and it was a major success to me. There were some hiccups, some mistakes made during the show, but all in all, this was a major moment to me, because coming into the show, a lot of people were complaining about the booking of the women and the way that this didn't seem like the way that this didn't seem like the WWE was taking the moment seriously. It seemed like the women consistently were taking a back seat to some of the storylines going on both SmackDown and Raw, even though they had this show coming up. And it was such a controversial matter because they're heading to Saudi Arabia this weekend, and that's a whole nother conversation within itself. I'm probably not going to cover that today. But the women were given an opportunity to shine with their own show here, and shine is exactly what they did. Now, before we go really kind of talking about this subject matter, I want to kind of definitely point out that while the WWE is kind of were promoting this as a historical moment, something that had never been done before. It had never been done within WWE's wheelhouse. There are multiple other promotions, from TNA to Shimmer to Glow to so many other outlets that have streaming services that feature women's wrestling prominently and have done all women's shows. So do not be mistaken in thinking that this is the first time that's ever happened, because it has happened other times in the past. So I just wanted to make sure I point that out there, because it was definitely, it shouldn't be any controversy around that, shouldn't be any confusion around that. This was a major moment. This is a major moment for the show, but it's a major moment for the promotion, but it is not a first within the industry in any way, shape, or form. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and kind of talk about what occurred. And let's look at this from a historical standpoint. I'm sure everyone's kind of really aware of what really happened from top to bottom. Just a quick rundown where we had Trish Stratus and Lita defeated Mickie James and Alicia Fox in a tag team match. Nia Jax won the Battle Royal. She lasted throughout Ember Moon, which gives her a shot at the women's title in the future. Toni Storm beat Io Shirai for the 2018 Mae Young Classic title. That was a finalist match there. We're going to talk a little bit about Toni Storm. Sasha Banks, Bayley, and Natalya defeated the Riot Squad. Shayna Baszler defeated Kairi Sane to win her second NXT Women's title. Becky Lynch retained her title by defeating Charlotte Flair, and Ronda Rousey retained her title by defeating Nikki Bella. So that's just a quick rundown of what occurred from start to finish. I want to kind of talk about this as in an overall stance on what this means for women's wrestling, what's next for women's wrestling, what I hope to see coming out of this showcase. So some high level things here. I want to kind of start with Rousey and Bella. And, this was a match where a lot of people were first off upset that it was the main event. I think it was properly placed on the card, even though I think Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair was a better match, and Shayna versus Kairi Sane was a better match as well. But I understand why Rousey and Bella were the main event. And during my test episodes, I talked mainly about the promotion of this match and the issues I had with it, with the shaming that was Nikki was kind of subjected to, which was probably the laziest way that they could have booked this card or this match, because there were a lot of different ways that they could have gone with potentially bringing up Ronda Rousey's defeats in the UFC, bringing up other issues with the Bella Twins. But the way that they were characterized, and this kind of spoke to a lot of the issues that men have with women's wrestlers. It was you could tell that there was a lack of diversity in the writing room when this stuff was put together, because it sounded like a 17-year-old boy had wrote this content, and a lot of the insults that Rousey was throwing at the Bellas sound just like a lot of the commentary you see on Twitter when anyone brings them up. So it was an unfortunate matter, but the match delivered. It was pretty good. It was solid from start to finish. Rousey she's so stiff, but she got a submission win over Bella. But the question becomes, what's really next? And there are a couple of different ways they could go, and both of those are kind of tied into the other two title matches that were on this card, because as I mentioned, Becky Lynch defeated Charlotte Flair in the last women's standing match. It was a great match, almost 30 minutes. I don't know if this is better than the Bayley versus Sasha match that was at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2, but if it's not number one, it's definitely number two. This match was stellar from start to finish. Becky Lynch is the most over performer on the WWE roster right now. Let me go ahead and say that again. Male or female, Becky Lynch is the most over star on this roster. And the WWE needs to figure out a way to capitalize on that and not throw cold water on her to keep other individuals up. She's now been booked to face Ronda Rousey at Survivor Series in November. And this is a very intriguing matchup, because we all know that Rousey's going to win that match. She's undefeated. They're going to keep her undefeated probably up until WrestleMania next year. Why? I don't know. I don't think that's really important. But I would love to see a great competitive match between Rousey and Lynch. It should not be a squash match in any way, shape, or form. Because what a great match between these two sets up, it sets up a storyline that can then include Shayna Baszler, Jessamyn Duke, Marina Shafir, Charlotte Flair, Sasha, and Bayley. It does set up that quote unquote four horsewomen match that the WWE has been hinting at for almost 2 or 3 years now. And while some people weren't excited about that match, I think that this pairing between Becky and Rousey gives an opportunity to create some excitement around that match. So with that coming up in September, I hope that they give us something exciting and they don't give us something that's another squash match. Let's see how they book the lead into this match. Becky cut a very good promo on Rousey on Tuesday. So let's see how they book this and how they kind of lead into this. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for them to do something very good here. Hell, that match can main event SummerSlam, excuse me, Survivor Series by itself. Hands down, that match could main event. Can main event the show, and I would love for that to happen. I don't think it will, but I would love for that to happen because this is an opportunity for these two women to get highlighted, an opportunity to create some intrigue around the two biggest stars, the two biggest attractions in the organization today. And from there, I also want to talk about what occurred with Baszler and Kairi Sane. When I first saw the card, I thought that the Mae Young Classic match was going to steal the show, but a lot of commentary coming out is that that match time was cut because it was quick. I think it was right at 10 minutes. It was the shortest match on the card. It shouldn't have been, but it was the shortest match. I think Tony and Io have much more to offer, but it was just not done. I'm gonna get back to Tony Storm in a second, but the match between Baszler and Sane, those two have incredible chemistry. There, the last match they had, where Sane won to become champion, was amazing. This one upped it, and it included the narrative of adding in Duke and Shafir. What I would like to see, there's been a lot of commentary back and forth about how do you bring these three women up to the main roster and not have them overshadowed by Rousey. If you were to keep Rousey undefeated into next year, I would like to see Shayna Baszler to be the first one to defeat her. And what I mean by that is that if you know the history between these two from an MMA standpoint and how that can be properly translated into the professional wrestling world, this is almost a can't miss story. If you go back to The Ultimate Fighter, I think back in 2014, I believe it was. Let me see when that was. But there, if you are unaware what The Ultimate Fighter is, it's basically a reality show where fighters are brought together, put in the house for opportunity to fight within the UFC. There was a season where Ronda Rousey, it was 2013. There was a season where Ronda Rousey hosted the show. Excuse me, she was a coach on the show, and she was pitted against Misha Tate. And she was pitted against Misha Tate, and though they were the two coaches for the show, and they both picked their teams, Baszler ended up on Rousey's team, and that's kind of where their friendship started. Now, Baszler is a woman who has a wealth of experience, and she's a prominent figure. She's a trailblazer in women's MMA. I mean, if you look back, she began fighting in her professional career started in 2003. So compare that to Rousey's professional career, which started in, let me see, Rousey's professional fight career started in 2011, so almost 10 years later. 2010, that's when she was fighting as an amateur. So to think that, and this is just kind of like the narrative that I would put in place for bringing Baszler up and having her turn on Rousey and be the first one, is the first one to defeat her, is that you can create a situation where you have them band together as the four horsewomen of MMA or whatever you want to call it, run over some of the other women on the roster. While Rousey is a babyface, I think that there is an opportunity to turn her into a heel at some point in time, and people will despise her. I don't know if she really wants to play that role. Maybe she plays that role in the future. But bring these people up, bring them up as potential faces. I don't know if you bring them up as potential faces, but have Baszler turn on the group one way or another with the motive of she's the real pioneer in women's combat sports, not Rousey. I'm not saying that that's true or not, but have that be her motivation to prove that she is the real trailblazer. She was the one who actually started wrestling first. She was the one that was competing in promotions like Evolve, like she was on the independent circuit, doing Shimmer, having matches with Rhea O'Reilly, Mia Yim. She was training with Josh Barnett first. She was the one out there already doing that before Rousey came in to play and and started wrestling. Some people even kind of hinted at the idea that the only reason why Baszler was booked so strongly right when she stepped into NXT is because of her relation to Rousey. Some people also kind of throw the idea out there that Duke and Shafir, the only reason why they're getting fast tracked is because they're linked to Rousey. Have them turn on Rousey with that being the narrative, being their motivation, and you can set something up where Baszler and Rousey face off in WrestleMania for next year, and it'd be something interesting to me. I know they're already talking about Charlotte and Rousey at some point next, and I think you can still do that. Maybe kind of later on in the year, maybe like a SummerSlam event, something like that. There's some space. There's space for multiple opportunities with these women that are coming up on the roster right now. But that brings me to the next question: is are the women in the WWE roster being properly booked? Because the next day after Evolution on Raw, you saw very little mention of the women. In fact, the only match, I think they had two matches on the card. One was Ember Moon versus Nia Jax, which ended up in a I think it was a no contest or whatever it was. I can't remember what the finish was, but Tamina got involved. And the other was a 10-woman tag match with Lita, Trish, Natalya, Sasha, and Bayley against the Riot Squad, Alicia, and Mickie James. So we've constantly talked about how with 3 hours of content on Monday, 2 hours of content on Tuesday, almost 3 more hours of content on Wednesday, you still have main event. Why are all the women being clumped together and presented instead of allowing their individual personalities to kind of shine through and be given and why aren't they being given equitable time and placement and care as some of the men are on the roster? And you can say one reason or another. Yes, there's time restraints, etc., but there's an opportunity there that I think that WWE is missing out on. I do believe there are many women on the roster that could excel as stars and performers in the ring if given the opportunity. Bayley, Banks, Lynch, Charlotte, Baszler, Rousey, Ruby Riott. Ruby Riott is like the MVP of the women's division this year, in my opinion. Liv Morgan excelled much further than I thought she really was. She looked fantastic in her role as of late. Carmella, as much as I hated Carmella as champion, she's continued to grow. She's continued to excel and do the best within her role. There's talent up and down this women's roster, but they don't get the type of placement and opportunity that I think that they should to allow them to become the stars that they really can. And I think that there's opportunity there. The WWE Evolution showed that. It created that opportunity. When the opportunity was given to them, that show proved that there's an appetite for women's wrestling because the crowd response at the event was amazing. The narrative and the conversations that have been going on since it's just something to see. Like, I knew that there were a lot of female professional wrestling fans out there, but to see them band together, for lack of a better term, and get behind all the women and cheer them on and support them is one thing. And also seeing male wrestling fans cheer them on and support them is just as moving as well to me. Yes, you do have those individuals that are being foolish in their responses. I mean, there's some quote unquote wrestling influencers who didn't even cover the event, or they talk about women. They talk about the women wrestlers in a way that's almost detestable. I'm not going to say any names, but there's individuals out there, and you don't see them even talking about evolution. One thing that I've been kind of looking for and kind of digesting over this week is listening to what women reporters and women, I guess, writers who cover pro wrestling have been saying about the event, and it's just been moving listening to them talk about the stories of their reaction, their emotional reaction as they were watching the event. If you didn't listen to Fightful.com, they did a recap on Sunday night or Monday, I believe it was. I listened to it on Monday, talking about Evolution, and listening to the two co-hosts that were on with Sean Ross Sapp was just amazing from start to finish. So Evolution showed that there's a place for women's wrestling. There's a place for the content. There's a place for all of these women on the card. Do I think that they should go with their own 1 hour show like they do with NXT? I think it would be awesome if it's run the same way this show is. It should have a more indie feel. If you can get the same writing team, get that Triple H works with NXT, get them behind just a women's weekly show, I would watch that all day, every day. I do not want the people who are in charge of the main roster storylines, that creative group. They should be kept as far away from anything that is anything that involves this show going forward. I think there's an opportunity there, but having that group do the work will not best serve the people that are on that aspect of the roster at this point in time. So the last thing I really wanted to talk about, in reference to Evolution, before I move on to WWE Crown Jewel, I guess I will talk about that tonight, is Toni Storm. And Toni Storm I wasn't the biggest, let me back up. I was aware of Toni Storm before the Mae Young Classic, the last year's Mae Young Classic. She was someone that I was intrigued with on the independent scene. So what I saw from her on Sunday was that she is someone that can be a star. And I jokingly asked the question on Twitter that WWE can't possibly mess this up, right? Like, they can't. She has the same look of someone like a Trish Stratus when Trish first came in, but she's been wrestling since she was 13 years old. She's 22 now, wrestling all around the world. So she has the experience. She has the ring poise. If you saw her techniques in the ring, dude, she's a pro. Her the Storm Zero, the Tiger Suplex, the what is it? The Tiger Driver that she uses. There wasn't a hitch of timing or anything that was off with that move at all. She is a consummate pro, and I think that she's someone that the WWE can get behind, who they can promote, and who they can build into a star. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with her next. I do not think she should be pigeonholed, for lack of a better term, on NXT UK or UK NXT, whatever it's being called. I don't think that that's the right outlet for her, because she's so much bigger than that brand. Same thing with Pete Dunne. He can be so much bigger than that brand as well too. But if they pigeonhole them in that space, it's going to close them off to a big aspect of the market, because right now everybody doesn't watch the network. I think they have they have a little more than 1 million subscribers, but we know that their viewership is much more than that on the weekly shows that are on USA and eventually moving to Fox with SmackDown. There's an opportunity to build her into a bigger star if they put her into the right place. She looked fantastic in that match. It was quick. She looked fantastic in every Mae Young match she had this year and last year. So I'm hoping that they get this right. There are very few layups in professional wrestling. I think that there's an opportunity to look at her as, I don't want to say a layup per se, but she's close. She's close to being ready now. And I'm just like, they can't get this wrong, right? I'm asking a question like that. Like, they just can't get this wrong, right? The huge question mark. I just hope that they don't. But we'll see what happens in the near future. But I just wanted to make sure I took a couple minutes to talk about her in her performance, because she is definitely a star, someone that is worth watching now and in the future. So I wanted to then now pivot and talk about Crown Jewel event that's scheduled for Friday in Saudi Arabia. And this has been, even if you don't follow professional wrestling, you're aware that this has been a monumental PR nightmare for the promotion. The reason being is because we're well aware of the situation going on with the Washington Post reporter who was killed in the consulate in Istanbul. His name is Jamal Khashoggi. He was a permanent resident of the United States, and he was very outspoken against Saudi Arabia and their crown leadership. So when he was killed in that area, a lot of businesses such as CNN and others began pulling out of their business deals and upcoming business situations with Saudi Arabia. There was pressure that was being put on the WWE, not necessarily huge pressure, but there was enough that people were wondering if they were going to pull out of the event. And while it's easy for people to say that the WWE should pull out, I understand from a business standpoint why they could not. I'm someone who has holdings of WWE stock, and I've seen the stock drop off exponentially this week. And I think it's partially because of the backlash going on around this here. It's a situation that is not going to go well. The first trip to Saudi Arabia didn't go over well when they went there for the Greatest Royal Rumble. And I understand this is a massive influx of money into the organization. I think they get somewhere close to like 10 million or something like that per show. I think overall the deal is worth close to 45 million, something like that. It's a monumental deal that is putting cash in the WWE's coffers, which allows them to do things like sign a lot of new athletes that they're bringing in, manage the network, continue to do bigger and better shows. I understand the business aspect of it, but the social responsibility part, there's no way that they're going to win this. And even though, and they even make the situation worse by today announcing that they're going to bring back Hulk Hogan, after who's been basically exiled for his racist and bigoted comments that he was caught on tape saying a couple years back. They're bringing him back to be the host as of the event, and I just seeing that made me just basically face palm. Like, these people are trying to get this wrong. John Cena has backed out. Daniel Bryan has backed out. They said they're not going. I don't think anyone else is backing out. But yeah, and I don't know if anyone else is backing out, but Those are the two biggest names that could. I mean, if Seth Rollins did, that would be even big. Randy Orton is going as well. None of the women are going. Renee Young is going to be in the booth to do the call, which I think is amazing there. It's interesting because I wonder if they see that as kind of like an appeasement factor, because they know that the first time they went, they didn't take any of the women on the roster. In fact, Saudi Arabia chastised the WWE for even having women in their promotion and the highlight reels that were playing in the arena. So I wonder if they think that taking Renee Young is a benefit to them, or it's a way to kind of do like a hey, look, we're bringing a woman into work, the event, as like I guess like a pat on the back or something like that. But this is not a situation that's going to go over well. It's interesting because like Rousey was talking about how this is going to uh, help create change in the area. JBL was saying this is going to help create change. Mark Henry was taking shots, I'm not going to say taking shots, but he was saying that Daniel Bryan and John Cena are cheating the fans by not showing up. Those messages, while I see that they're towing the line, except for Rousey, because Rousey has the star power to do whatever she wants, but she's also a Sandy Hook truther. Like, I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. So her social and political stances, I don't want to know about them, because I wouldn't be surprised if I was kind of shocked and appalled with what she would have to say about how she feels about things. But that's neither here nor there. This is a situation that is not going to end well. Period. It's not. They are going to fulfill their contractual obligations. They're going to continue going back to Saudi Arabia to fulfill their contractual obligations. This situation is not going to go over. It's not going to go over well. It's going to continue to come up every time they create and launch a new Saudi Arabia show. I think they're doing 2 a year. Nothing is going to come out of this from a positive standpoint, and it's clear what rules within the WWE. The almighty dollar is more important, and I don't think there's any amount of community service that this organization can do to help wash this away. They do a lot. I mean, about John Cena's Make-A-Wish contributions. You know about their contributions to Susan G. Komen and what they do for so many children struggling with serious illnesses. They do their fair share of community service and service and work in that area. But what's going on in Saudi Arabia, acknowledging what's going on in Saudi Arabia and still doing business with them after so many individuals have requested and asked that you not do it, it's not going to go over well in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to be interested in seeing what the coverage of this event is like, because I've already talked to a number of colleagues I have, and they're not watching it, and they're not covering the event in any way, shape, or form. I've talked to some outlets that are still covering it, but I'm interested in seeing what the mainstream media, how they cover this event, because few have covered the issues around them going back to Saudi Arabia. Few covered the first trip to Saudi Arabia and how negative that was. This one is receiving more coverage, and I'm wondering if that's going to continue as these shows kind of pop up. But either way, I'm not watching it. I'm not a fan. I didn't watch the first one, and I think that this one is more controversial than that. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and bring this show to a close today. We're going to try to always keep it within like 40 minutes to an hour. I don't want to talk anyone's ear off. This is the first episode. We're going to continue to iterate, continue to do things differently. I hope to have a guest on next week to talk to her about women's wrestling, because we're going to kind of continue that narrative, continue that conversation there, and look at what other major topics are going on in professional wrestling. But with that in mind, I want to say thank you for listening to the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast, episode 1. My name is Raphael Garcia. You can catch me on Twitter at rgarcia_sports, where I'm talking professional wrestling, MMA, boxing, jiu-jitsu, football. I'm talking just about anything in sports. I'm also talking a lot of social commentary as well. And sometimes just up there being foolishness, being foolish. So if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But it is who I am. And you can catch this show at MMAratings.net. We will continue to post all of our content all over the place. So with that in mind, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And with that in mind, have a great night and have a great weekend, everybody.